So you found the skeleton. How would you tell people that was you personally? How would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on this.
Hey everyone, welcome to Dapper Reacts 118. Kipp is missing because Kipp is in fact missing in action. We don't know where he is. He might have been devoured by a sarlacc. He might be being chased through the woods of the Pacific Northwest by Sasquatch. He might have been devoured by like a resurrected stellar sea cow. We just don't know.
Yeah, I mean, he could also be helping people do their civic duty. There's also that.
Okay, yeah, but I think that having been devoured by a Sasquatch, or well, chased by a Sasquatch, or devoured by a stellar sea cow are at least as plausible as that he is helping to run a polling place due to the whole Canadian general election thing.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if he comes back and he is in fact now a pile of sea cow poop, we'll know for certain.
Okay. Yeah.
So, there you go. I mean, you know, look, you can never tell. But also, if you're in Canada and you're watching this right now, you better be in line to vote. Or have already voted.
Yeah.
So, go do your civic duty, and, I don't know, maybe don't vote in favor of fascism, Canada. I don't think you will. And based on the most recent polling I've seen from Canada, it seems like you're really not going to. But, you know, just keep up with that energy. So, there you go. Because, you know what, I would rather not have both both of the mainly English-speaking countries in North America fall into this nonsense. I would prefer there be some bastion of sanity left where people speak the same first language as me, and where I don't have to cross an entire ocean to get there.
Robert Adsit said voting is Monday.
So Monday? Well, what's Kipp doing today, then? Is he setting up?
Oh, probably.
Oh, fine. Kipp has even less excuse. Can't believe. Anyway.
Working on Shabbos? Gah!
I mean, of the things to break Shabbos rules, if you're someone who follows them, I feel like a federal election might actually be... I think you can make an argument that it is, in fact, something that is important to protecting human lives, given the stakes currently going on.
Listen, we're Jews, me, not Kipp. We will make arguments for just about anything.
It's true. And look, saving people's lives is one of the things where, like...
Write it down!
you do not have to follow the Shabbos no-work rules if you're saving lives. That's why you can...
Yep, that's why there's...
Jewish doctors,
Hasidic,
EMTs...
Yeah. I actually used to talk to one pretty frequently. He was a Orthodox EMT.
Yeah.
He was like, oh yeah, we totally work on Saturday. Like, da-da-da. I'm like, yeah, that tracks.
Yeah, because, look, there's a principle in Jewish halakha that says that, like, if you're preserving human life, it trumps every other rule. Right? If somehow eating that bacon cheeseburger is going to save someone's life, and you're doing it on Saturday, eat that bacon cheeseburger to somehow save someone's life. Now, is that ever going to come up? I very much doubt it.
Do you know the very rare, like, 3 or 4 exceptions to that?
I don't.
We'll have to talk about that some other time. But yeah, there's only, like...
The bacon sandwich? Is that one of them?
No.
Okay.
No.
It would save your life, but I can't eat this bacon. I'm sorry, you're going to die.
Yeah, it's a very, like, last minute stopgap thing. But yeah, they're very not likely to occur. But yeah. They're there. Anyway.
Probably about as likely to occur as needing to eat a bacon sandwich in order to save someone's life.
Yeah, exactly.
Alright, so...
And then it's funny, though, because it's so often misread or misheard. People think that it's something that's not. So the name is... Well, you have to Google. The name is Pikuach Nefesh, saving a life or preserving life. But a lot of people will joke and call it Pikachu Nefesh because it's close.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? Pikachu needs that breath of life indeed as well.
Yeah.
Alright, Pillow Plump, half dog, half canine says, Happy Easter, everyone. The day Jesus laid a bunch of eggs in the woods and made rabbits go find them. I believe that is accurate. Yeah. Yep. Which also... Okay, so here's another weird thing. I noticed that Craig is streaming pretty much directly after this, which means that if you're not going to go watch Power Rangers with me, you should definitely go check out Craig's stream. But he's arguing with someone about evolution, starting at 2 p.m. Eastern. Sorry, 2 p.m. Pacific. But his thumbnail makes it look like he's arguing with an Orthodox priest, and I'm thinking, like, there's no way that there's any Orthodox priest who's not too busy today of all days.
Yeah.
Like
this weekend of all weekends.
This week, really. Because, like, if you...
Yeah, the whole week.
If you add up the amount of time, like, if an Orthodox priest were in church for every service that is prescribed for this week, on its own, it's a full-time job just to be... It's actually more than a full-time job, just to be there for every service this week. There's no way one of them is like, oh yeah, I should go argue about evolution today. So, like, I think he just found that picture and saw that it was a guy with a cross on it and was like, all right, here we go, I'll slap it in the thumbnail. But I did message him. I don't know if he's going to get back to me. I was like, were you debating an Orthodox priest? Because that'd be weird. But also then I saw that the guy's name was Jim Bob, and that doesn't sound like the name of an Orthodox priest. They're all like Father Vasily or something like that. That's a stereotype that's not actually true. But, like, it also isn't entirely untrue. All right. Let's go with this. So what we are doing today, if you are new, is we are going to be looking at this book about the Tower of Babel from Bodhi Hodge, the son-in-law of Ken Ham, who is no longer associated with Answers in Genesis. He has moved on to, I believe, start his own thing. Which, I mean, hey, I get it. He wasn't... It became very clear that he was not in the line of succession to take over AIG, which I'm sure he was kind of hoping for, right? To be just like the permanent Nepo baby of Answers in Genesis. And then it, like, no, that didn't happen. His father-in-law seemed to have absolutely no interest in handing the reins over to him. So, now, to be fair, a lot of this is me just basing on what it looks like and my admittedly dim view of everyone at Answers in Genesis. So, you know, I'm not stating these things as facts. These are what I believe probably happened. This is very much speculation, and all of this is alleged. But I suspect that he, realizing that he had absolutely no shot at taking over, was like, fine, I'll start my own ministry with Blackjack, and because he's a good Christian man, what's a good Christian version of hooker? Let's see. All right. Tell you what. People, tag me in the chat with what you think would be the Christian
youth
version.
Pastors.
There you go, with Blackjack and the youth pastors. Sounds way less fun. Oh, anyway, Linguistics is just fancy animal sounds. Geek, who's been a member for 24 months, says, "Nah, I just finished watching the Biddle and Matt videos now. I'm out of here. Gonna watch this tomorrow. Much love. Avoid the Bilbo." That's fair. All right, so I'm going to start off reading because we can't remember who finished off last time, and also I rolled a die and it came up with an odd number, which meant me, because I had assigned Vishanti all the even numbers. So there you go. And you might ask, why don't you flip a coin? I don't have a coin handy, but I almost always have dice handy. Jillian Channel, Social Secretary Wren says, well, I was Catholic, so nuns? And then Sapphire Magical Wolf Paws Light says Singles Night. Those are also interesting options.
You know,
of youth pastors.
If you've seen Brotherhood of the Wolf, nuns is not inaccurate.
Yeah. All right, maybe nuns. Also, not just Catholics have nuns, right? The Orthodox, both Oriental and Eastern, have nuns. There are Anglican nuns. So, you know. I've been to an Anglican monastery, but it was a men's monastery. I don't think I've ever actually met an Anglican nun, but I've met Anglican monks. I know that there are Anglican. I've met Catholic nuns. I've met Catholic monks and Eastern Orthodox monks. I don't think I've ever met an Eastern Orthodox nun. I think the only nuns I've ever met were Catholic. My great aunt was a Catholic nun. And then she gambled with me and she took all my nickels. Because I didn't really know the card game very well. But yeah, she came down from Quebec, where she lived, to visit my grandmother. And then we played cards and she took all my nickels. And spent them on whatever elderly nuns spend money on. I'm sure that's what she spent them on. So, like, I don't know, like, extra tea? I don't know. If you're an elderly Catholic nun, let me know what you spend nickels on. Metageeky Platypus Warlock for $2 says, Bodhi was cursed out like Ham by Ham. With a little pig emoji. Yes. Yes. Alright. So I feel like there are no elderly Catholic nuns in my audience. I feel like I do not cultivate that particular demographic as an audience member.
But if you're out there,
yeah,
that'd be pretty based.
Look, hey, if there's an elderly Catholic nun watching, you are absolutely welcome to watch. I just feel like I don't cater to you, so I understand if you're not watching. But you're more than welcome. I have nothing against Catholic nuns as a group. I have some issues that I've had with individual Catholic nuns, but that's a different thing. All right, here we go. Are there any extra biblical accounts of a language split? This is going to be Bodhi fishing around for any etiology of why there's more than one language that he can find anywhere in the world, and then saying, hey, look, someone else wrote a story about this. It must be a corruption of the Babel story. Because, remember, Bodhi is a hyperdiffusionist. He basically thinks that every aspect of every culture is actually just some kind of corruption of the original culture of Babel. So, yeah. All right, well, that's my prediction, though. I haven't actually read this. So if we get that right, then it's a drink for a correct prediction. All right, for those who have studied the flood and creation, there are legends of these events found in cultures all over the globe. Okay, so yeah, the first sentence is that's what he's doing. In fact, several hundred have been documented, and both Christian and non-Christians have written books on the subject. This is to be expected. Okay. People who left Babel were not ignorant of their past. They were well aware of creation and the flood, having had a common grandfather, Noah, who was a preacher. 2 Peter 2:5 squared. Furthermore, I'm just saying squared because look, if you have an inline citation to 2 Peter 2:5, you don't then need to also put the text in. Yeah, you don't need to do this. Let people look it up on their own.
That's why he squared it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I know. And I'm sorry, I know it's the thing is, if it didn't come after an inline citation, then I would automatically, my brain would be like, well, that's just the next footnote. But because it's after an inline citation that itself ends in a number, my brain is like, nope, that's squared. That's 2 Peter 2:25, actually.
I love what Robert Maywell in the chat says, a nun gets +1 on damage when using ruler as a weapon.
Okay, now to be fair, I've had nuns as teachers because I did go to a Catholic high school, and none of them ever used corporal punishment on the students.
Yay!
So, and one of them also was a substitute teacher there, but what her full-time job was when she wasn't needed substitute teaching was volunteering at 2 different shelters. One was for recovering heroin addicts, and the other one was an HIV, was shelter for homeless people with HIV, where they would get free HIV medicine and a place to stay.
Someone had to balance the scales for fucking Mother Teresa.
Yeah. So like,
shout out the nuns doing that volunteer work.
Yeah, I have had some excellent people that I've met that were nuns, and some less than excellent people who I've met that have been nuns. But the ones who were great were doing a whole heck of a lot. And actually, there was a documentary about like where I grew up, when I grew up, there was a pretty big drug problem in the area, to the point that there were multiple documentaries made about my hometown and the drug problem. And the nun who was a substitute teacher appeared in one of them several times while working at like her clinic area. And then every once in a while she'd come in and teach like math. And students would ask her more about things like, you know, what it's like working at like a homeless shelter than like what is the answer to this geometry problem. Because, you know, that was what we found more interesting. Which, to be fair, I get it. It is more interesting. And yeah, so... Anyway, furthermore, Noah and Shem lived 350 and 500 years after the flood, giving the people ample time to learn about even more details. In fact, they may well have had some details that were not revealed to us by God in Scripture. Ooh, careful, Bodhi. Sounds like you're about to be adding to Scripture. So this is what I mean when I say Bodhi is a hyperdiffusionist, right? Fundamentally, he has the same basic idea of how history works as, like, Graham Hancock, right? No one ever comes up with an idea independently from someone else from different parts of the world, right? Like, hey, why do so many people make pyramids all across the world? It's not because that's just a convenient way to stack up rocks and people aren't dumb. It's not because of that. It's because the Tower of Babel was actually probably like a pyramid shaped like a ziggurat. And that cultural that actually went with all the people who scattered out of Babel.
The most hilarious thing was watching the Flint Dibble Graham Hancock debate. Flint Dibble, who's an actual archaeologist, He's the son of an archaeologist. His dad loved archaeology so much he named his 2 boys Flint and Chip. Okay?
Yep.
They're serious. So he was talking about like, hey, Graham, you know, white supremacists and neo-Nazis really love your work. And Graham's like, oh, how dare you? And he's like, yeah, they really love it because you're saying the things that they can't say out loud. And Graham is more offended that people are telling him that white supremacists love his work than the fact that he's actually quoting white supremacists like Ignatius Donnelly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, he's more offended that you're calling it out than he is the fact that he's using white supremacist material. So, you know, they're debating this. And he's like, man, listen, you keep saying that there's evidence that this, or that there's an Ice Age culture, which we know there wasn't, right, you know, influencing all these other cultures and da-da-da-da-da-da. We don't have any evidence of that, period.
We have strong evidence against it, even.
We have strong evidence against it, and Graham backpedals and goes, well, no, they didn't, like, give the actual technology, they just told people about it. So now we're back to, like, no, they didn't actually directly materially influence them. They just talked about it, and the people went off of, like,
vibes.
Hearsay.
It was hearsay and vibes.
It just,
It would be like if I went to an uncontacted tribe in the Amazon and was like, hey, guys, check out this smartphone. And then I walk away, and then you expect that in, like, a couple hundred years, they're going to have their own smartphones. Like, no, that's not how anything works, Graham.
I was gonna watch the whole thing on Flint's channel, but it would have made me too mad.
Yeah.
So I watched Professor Dave's recap because his rage is my rage.
That's fair.
And that felt real good.
And so, yeah, Bodhi just cannot conceive of the idea that, like, first of all, I don't think he's ever heard of an etiology, right? A myth just designed to explain why something is the way it is. And the thing is, cultures are replete with etiologies that do not match very well. But they're often for the same kinds of things. Like, why are there so many different kinds of animals? Why is there anything at all instead of nothing? How did the land get here? How did the sea get here?
Oh.
How are we related to the other ethnic groups around us? And also, why doesn't everyone speak the same language is another one of those things. Right? Because most etiologies for the start of humans have them starting in one place and then spreading out. Because that just kind of makes sense. Then why don't they all have the same language? Different etiology. You have an explanation.
Team O&B nailed it. Cargo cults. It's just ancient cargo cults.
Yeah. John from the Atlantean. But with this in mind, as the events at Babel unfolded and people were scattered to various parts of the world, it is reasonable to expect them to take their history with them and pass it along to subsequent generations. It is also reasonable to expect that these accounts would be embellished, lose information, or otherwise be changed or aspects forgotten. All right. The Greek god Jove for 100 Argentinian pesos says, "This is unfair. It's much harder for Bodhi to throw things because to learn you need
know
things. It's much harder for Bodhi to know things because to learn you need to axolotl questions." I guess that works better with the axolotl pronunciation than the axolotl. You need to axolotl questions. Nice. There we go.
That makes my brain hurt.
Because you keep reading it as axolotl.
Yeah, I'm like reading it the way that it would have been spoken and the way that it's supposed to be spoken. Yeah. But people don't know why the Latinization works that way, and I
mean, to be fair, if you're an English speaker, that is an extremely unintuitive Romanization for axolotl.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not perfect, but listen, when you're working with, like, 16th century Spaniards dealing with an indigenous American language.
Actually, given that they're
going to do their best.
Given that their starting point was, like, early modern Spanish, I actually think that the Romanization works pretty well for Nahuatl.
Yeah, it does, because at the time, the X letter was used really often as either a sh or a k sound. So that worked out real well. It's just that now we don't. We pronounce that a lot harder than they did.
Yeah. Because that is one of the things. If you're going to want to look into Nahuatl and you want to use the Romanization for it, which you probably should, because that's how Nahuatl speakers do it too. You really quickly realize that this is actually a pretty good Romanization. if you're like a Spaniard in the 1600s.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you're not. So it's not. Vinny Marchenko for €2.
Not intuitive.
Vinny Marchenko for €2 says, offering for the cargo cult of Kipp with a candle emoji. Thank you very much.
Also, I think that people would have much less problems if they just pronounced it the way that Spanish speakers pronounce it in Mexico, and that's ajolote.
I was going to say, it's
Much
not
easier.
ajolote. It is easier than axolotl. For one thing, it doesn't require most English speakers to learn a new sound.
Yeah, exactly.
They should learn that sound, because that sound is also in Klingon. Anyway, of course, it is by the Bible, through the Holy Spirit, that the truth about creation and the flood is revealed. Pay no attention to the other myths, it's only my myths.
Yeah, just mine.
Yeah, and in looking at these accounts, there are similarities and deviations. The Babylonian account in the ancient Epic of Gilgamesh has a cube for an ark instead of a proper ocean-surviving dimensions the biblical ark has. 300 by 50 by 30 cubits. Hey, Bodhi, you can't. It doesn't matter if you can survive the ocean if the ocean is made of plasma now because of the heat problem. Like, literally, there is nothing that anyone will ever argue in favor of the flood that I will take seriously until they have a solution for the heat problem. Like, because none of it matters until then. Until then, the survival of any kind of ark, the survival of the planet as an object in space, is completely invalidated by the heat problem. So, no, it doesn't matter how well this boat could survive the ocean. There isn't an ocean as it stands right now, according to you.
You know, I think if I remember to do this, which I probably won't because ADHD, I want to make a riff on the Iron Man 1 end scene where Tony and Ironmonger are flying up into the atmosphere, and he's like, "How'd you solve the heat problem?" And Obadiah goes, "Or icing problem."
Right.
And he starts to freeze over, and Tony just bonks him on the head and sends him back down to Earth. I want that to be
it is a really
science
good scene for
versus younger creationists.
Yep. Josh McGee's for $5 says, the name's Axe. Bruce Campbell, probably.
Yes. Accurate.
Alright, here we go.
Anytime they break in with all of these freaking explanations, I just want to run that as a clip.
Yes.
Just to shoot them down, like, how'd you fix the heat problem? Heating
Bonk.
problem. Bonk!
I really like that. It is hard to believe that people today actually think the Bible borrowed these skewed accounts. Is it, Bodhi?
Is it?
Because those accounts come first, and all that you really had to do is say, like, I feel like in my account, the boat should be more boat-like. There you go. Why is that inherently less likely than someone taking a realistic boat and being like, but what if cube, though?
I have never once gotten a satisfactory or even coherent explanation as to why all these other cultures wrote their legends down way before the alleged, like, Mosaic author wrote them down. I have never once gotten an explanation for that.
And the thing is, we know that other parts of the Bible directly depend literarily on other literature in the area, right? Not this in particular. Like, I don't think this had, like, the person who wrote Noah's Flood story had a copy of, like, the Epic of Gilgamesh hanging out. But we know that a lot of, like, parts of various bits of, like, the Torah and the Psalms are just lifted off of other earlier things, like Ugaritic poetry to other gods. Right? Like, it's not, like, a question that we have to ask, like, were the authors of biblical texts inspired by the religious text of nearby civilizations? Yeah, unarguably so. Grumpy Kevin for $9.99 says, stacking the curse jar so Kipp can curse like a sailor for an entire stream when he gets back. Nice.
Nah.
I like it. Kipp will just come back. He probably actually won't swear that much next stream, because next stream, remember, we're doing the food stream. We're not even going to talk about Bodhi. I mean, I guess unless he comes up. But, like, we're going to talk about, like, hey, Dapper, did you ever make that salmon confit and put it on a bagel? We'll find out. So, next stream, it's just foods. All the foods. Well, maybe not all the foods. Like, I didn't get, like, a horse sandwich or anything recently, so I can't talk about it. Because I'm not French. I'm American. They don't let us buy horse meat in America. You have to buy a horse and then pay to have it slaughtered, and and pay to have it dressed. Or you could dress it yourself, I guess. I mean, slaughter it yourself. But anyway, you have to buy a horse in order to get horse meat in America, which is nonsense. My French ancestry.
Spoiler alert, horses are not cheap.
No. And also, if you buy a horse in order to have it turned into horse meat, you can't sell that horse meat. You can either give it away or eat it yourself. Those are the only options. Also, I am not a lawyer, so don't take any of this as legal advice. Left-handed Jedi for $2 says, Bodhi or Archie-McArkface. There we go. Bodhi or Archie-McArkface is left-handed Jedi for $2. I mean, I would be okay with calling him Archie-McArkface, except I would absolutely forget that that's what I'm supposed to be calling him. So, Greek God Joe for 100 Argentinian pesos says, sorry, Dapper, but if we can accept the letter Chet, we can't, but we can accept axolotl. Okay, first, we can't accept the letter Chet. That's the thing. We can't. That's an unacceptable. Not happening. In fact, I'm taking a drink because I can't with the letter Chet. Anyway.
Chet.
Let's see. With all this in mind, readers should also suspect some accounts of a language split or a population scattering event in legends from around the world. Of course, the Bible records the true events, of course.
Uh-huh.
And believe it or not, ellipsis for no reason, there are quite a few. Bodhi, what is the tone you're going for? Dude, you've been referring to yourself in the third person and using big words you don't know the definition of all over the place in order to give yourself the air of writing a, academic style book. And then you have this sentence in here. And believe it or not, ellipsis, there are quite a few, exclamation mark. What are you doing, Bodhi? Do you just not have a tone in mind? Did you wake up one day and decide that maybe you should write this like it's a road sign for, the next gas station? What? Ugh. Author Pam Shepard. You know what? That's going to be the name of my next Shepard in my next Mass Effect playthrough. It's going to be Pam Shepard. Author Pam Shepard accumulated some of these legends in Answers magazine. Of course she did.
The final Pam Shepard.
A reproduction of the map used
That's going to be the name of mine.
All right.
When I finally get around to playing Mass Effect.
Eventually, I'm just going to say, all right, we're playing Mass Effect right now. It might be sooner than you think. A reproduction of the map used by Shepard to visualize the locations of the legends she documented below. I'm Commander Shepard, and these are my favorite regions of Earth.
I guarantee you, if you remind me, and I mean this, chat, you're gonna have to write this down somewhere, because, what's his name? Mark Meir. He goes to DragonCon every year. He's friends with all of, my cosplaying friends. I could get him to record something for us.
Get him to say, this is Commander Shepard, and this is my favorite channel on YouTube. That'd be pretty cool.
Well, I was thinking more that it dunks on some kind of creationist nonsense.
Well, that's
yeah, okay, that's cool too.
Yeah, or you could get Dapper Dinosaur as my favorite channel on YouTube. That'd be more specific, because then no one can steal it from me.
Yeah, the funny thing about Mark Meir is that he almost always makes it to the Marvel big photo shoot that we do, and he's frequently incognito. So he'll costume something that has a mask on it, and it's a super deep cut character. No one recognizes him until my friend Alan, who runs it, brings him up to the mic and is like, "Hey, everybody! Surprise, it's Mark Meir," and he does the voice. So.
All right, I just had an idea.
He's cool.
If we get 20 super chats that are teal or higher in the next 1 hour, Ashanti has to play Mass Effect.
Nah.
Within a month. What do you think?
Okay.
Okay. Ashanti has to play Mass Effect within a month. Here we go. So we have an hour to get 20 teal super chats, and then Vishanti has to actually finally play Mass Effect after me bothering her about it for a year, and her owning it for half that time. Vadim Marchenko, who's been a member for 4 months, says, who do you romance in Mass Effect? Well, I mean, it changes, right? But if I'm playing as Broshep, and I don't specifically go for something else, it's going to be Tali. Because Tali has one of the best character arcs in the entire series. And also, I don't know. I just really like Tally. Tally's the best, one of the best companions. And also I really like Legion, and she and Legion have a lot of interconnected story points, obviously. So yeah, it's gonna probably be Tally as my most common, but I think I've done all the other romance. Well, no, I haven't explored all of the Mass Effect 3 romance options. Mostly because I'm not hugely interested in a lot of the Mass Effect 3 only characters. So, yeah. I don't think I ever did the romance with your secretary lady from Mass Effect 2 either. I don't know, because she's not really much of a character. I think she only exists, like literally, I think the only reason she exists is to give a homosexual romance option for FemShep. I don't think there's any other reason that character even exists. Because in Mass Effect 1, all the options are either like just straight, or like you can do the FemShep with Liara, which isn't technically lesbian, because Liara's not actually like a woman or female or anything. But like she looks like a woman. So, and of course that's there for all the straight male gamers. That's who that's for.
Naturally.
Let's see. Vadim Marchenko for €5 says, Vish, do eat Commander Kirk.
Commander Kirk!
So yeah, you definitely have to now. Well, after we get the number. Because we only have one so far.
Okay.
Alright, here we go. So this is the map, which is literally just a map with basic thing. Okay, hold on. Hold on. This is weird.
This is...
So we mostly have...
What?
So mostly it's like... I don't even know. So Africa just gets one dot, but it's near Egypt. Europe gets a dot near Greece. There is no Asia dot. But India and the Middle East get different dots. But then also so does Southeast Asia. And Polynesia, which, okay, fair. North America, yeah, sure. But then Central America gets a dot. And Guatemala?
Guatemala!
And nothing for South America? This is. I'm taking a drink. I have no idea what the pattern is supposed to be here.
So, India and Guatemala. Okay.
Alex Sparkle says Liara is literally
buddy.
part of an all-female species. I disagree that she's part of an all-female species. Because in order to be an all-female species, you have to have a male sex. Otherwise, you don't actually have a sex at all. If the only gametes are all the same size, then you don't have sexes. And it seems like they don't even technically have gametes. They just reproduce asexually, but with, like, assistance. Now, in the all-female lizard populations that we have here on Earth, we actually know that ancestrally they had males within that population. And so we can therefore say that they're all female, because we do in fact actually know what a male of that species would look like if such a thing existed. It just no longer does. So yeah, I reject the contention that the Asari are in fact all female. I know that that's what it says in the Codex, but the Codex is sometimes wrong about science. So...
I recognize the council has made a decision. Seeing as a stupid-ass decision, decided to ignore it.
Look, I'm just saying, I think I know biology better than the people who wrote the Mass Effect codices. And therefore, when they say things about biology that can't be literally true, I feel justified in interpreting what they're saying as if they were saying it to, a layperson who doesn't know as much biology as, say, maybe I do. And therefore, me being able to reinterpret it slightly. Left-handed Jedi for $2 says, are there Klingon assassins? Just curious. The answer is yes. However, they are expected to show their face before they kill their intended target, and they are expected to not use poison. If they use poison or hide their face the entire time, yes, it is indeed dishonorable. If it is found out that you are such an assassin, you will be punished as a dishonorable Klingon. It won't be fun.
Dishonor on you, dishonor on your cow.
Also, probably dishonor on the person who hired you to be an assassin.
Yeah, and your house.
Yeah, and their house, yeah. So, like, it's not to say that Klingons don't hire assassins who are dishonorable, because they do. Klingons do dishonorable things all the time. It's just very, very frowned upon in a way that a less dishonorable assassin would not be. So, all right. Such accounts abound around the world. Greek writer Plato, in his book Critias, wrote...
Critias.
The Greek god Jove says, but if you're a good assassin, how would anyone know? Video cameras, there's the surveillance, there could be things like that. Also, sometimes people survive assassination. Sometimes you think that you got someone and you didn't, because you only stabbed them in one of their hearts and you missed the second heart because you were stabbing a Klingon. So, Team ONB Formula One Dog Racing for $5 says, prediction, cat meat will enter the US market with Trump endorsing the grab 'em by the McPussy burger. I mean, there's a euphemism for cat meat, and it's roof hair. Because it turns out that when you dress a cat so that it no longer has paws or a head or a tail, it's not all that easy to tell the difference between a hare and a cat. And cats like roofs, so you can catch a hare cat up on the roof. It's roof hair, and you can sell it in your butcher shop as a hare. Yeah. There you go. And here's from the Critias. In the days of old, the gods had the whole earth distributed among them by allotment. There was no quarreling, for you cannot rightly suppose that the gods did not know what was proper for each of them to have, or, knowing this, that they would speak to procure for themselves, by contention, that which more properly belonged to others. They all of them, by just appointment, obtained what they wanted, and people to their own districts. Now, different gods had their allotments, and in different places which they set in order.
This is just Psalm 82.
Not only is it Psalm 82, but also, there's nothing in here about different languages.
Nope.
Literally nothing. So, Bodhi, your first example isn't even what you said in this example of. I'm taking a drink for that. That's incredibly dumb. Alex Markle says, apparently early in planning, the Asari had a male design, but it was cut for time. Well, that's interesting, but since that's not part of any of the games, because even after they had time to bring it back, they opted not to, then I'm going to say that that is just not part of the Mass Effect universe as far as we know. So, if in fact we later find a male Asari, then I will reassess my statement that they are not an all-female species. That, in fact, they are just sexless. Sexless in the sense of not having sexes, not sexless in the sense of never doing anything sexual, because they very obviously do that all the time. With just about anyone. Okay, I want to rephrase that. It's not that they're just willing to do sexy things with anyone. They just do not have limits based on the sex, gender, or species of whom they're doing sexy times with. Various Asari actually often have very high standards for who they're going to do that with. It's just that they're not gender, sex, or species based. I feel like I'm talking way too much about Mass Effect.
I think you're... Anyway.
Look, there's a reason that they included sexy blue alien ladies. And it's to get people to talk about sexy blue alien ladies. And it worked. And it's still working. The Incas in South America also had a legend. In the story of the creator god Viracocha, they created the second race of human beings from clay, the earth, having painted his creations with distinctive colors and giving them different languages and customs that would distinguish them. He breathed life into them and caused them to descend into earth and disperse. Okay, but Bodhi, that is not at all a parallel.
That's distinctive clothes, not languages.
Yeah, well, actually, it does say, and given them different languages.
Well, it does say different languages,
yeah,
but
the thing is,
bro,
that means that they had distinctive languages from the start, and they were directed to have different languages by the creator god right away. Which means that this is not at all the same story. This is a fundamentally different story. Nothing like the Tower of Babel happens in this story.
I'm with Demon Trigger. South America wasn't even on the map.
There's that, too. Yeah. If it wasn't on the map, can we really trust that this story is even at all related or even real? The Greek god Joe for 100 Argentinian peso says, I know the go Viracocha.
God.
Who is Viracocha? Oh, God, okay. God. I know the god Viracocha. Who is Viracocha? Also Germanic tuas instead of tuas. Why can't Bodhi write good? Because the
Anglicization of these names is why that's spelled the way that it is.
Yeah. It's... Yeah, basically, English likes to re-transcribe things a lot, or at least sometimes it does, and it's not always going to stay the same. And also, there are different groups of various people speaking different dialects of what was Inca, and they're going to pronounce these gods differently too. So it's also possible that the Viracocha transliteration is coming from a different dialect.
Or German anthropologists and archaeologists were the first ones to write
there's that too.
Papers on them, so they got to decide how it would be.
Yeah,
So.
there's that too. A lot of science that we get in English actually has German roots where you wouldn't expect it. Like, you know, the electrocardiogram machine, EKG machine. I wonder why it's a K instead of a C, even though cardio starts with a C. It's because it's a German acronym. It's not English. In German, it's a K. Same thing with the KPG, which is the Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary. Why is it a K and not a C? Again, it's because of German. In German, Cretaceous starts with a K. So, yeah, there's all sorts of weird stuff like that.
I was about to say that the language of the Inca is Quechua or Runasimi.
Team O&B Formula 1 dog racing for $5 says, today I learned European countries use different animals in their two critters, one object idiom. Rabbits, flies, specific types of birds. Interesting.
Oh, like two birds, one stone?
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool.
I'm going to kill two flies with one atom bomb. Yep.
You certainly will.
Yeah.
That will be the minimum.
It's very easy to do. Once you have the atom bomb, that's the hard part. Till then, yeah, it's pretty tough. But once you have that atom bomb, my goodness, those flies are screwed.
So is the rest of us, because we don't talk about Judy.
Well, a chart of some languages or people groups splitting from around the globe is the following table. That is a sentence. A chart of some languages or people groups splitting from around the globe is in the following. What does that mean?
That is not a good sentence.
Splitting from around the globe. What does that mean?
A chart of some languages.
Or people group.
It should be like, okay, this is a chart in the following table. And in that chart, it's either languages or people groups that are splitting from Babel.
Yeah.
And those language groups and people are from around the globe. Y'all, this is why paying attention and internalizing grammar is important.
Yeah. There are many examples, but this one is mine. But those examples in the table should be sufficient to show that there are legends of Genesis 11, 1 through 9 found throughout the world. This is expected, and deviations in their descriptions of the events are common. Such finds are great confirmation of the truthfulness of Scripture. No, because... Oh my god, I'm taking a drink.
This is so frustrating.
Odie, in order to say that these are deviations from your story, you had to assume the truth of your story in the first place. But once you've done that, then using the idea of the deviations as evidence of the initial premise that you already assumed in order to come to your first conclusion, that makes it circular again. You don't get to assume this is true, therefore these must be deviations, therefore the deviations are evidence of the truth of the original scripture that you're citing. That's just circular reasoning. That isn't evidence. That's just you explaining how you think these things got here, but it's not evidence for the truth of the original claim. If you wanted this to be truth for original claim, Bodhi, what you would do is you would have to give us a description of what you think would be the types of legends people would have surrounding language if they were not all derived from the event that you think they're derived from. What would you expect to see if your supposition were false versus what you would expect to see if it were true? And then you could go through different examples and showing us why they do or do not meet your criteria for if Babel is true versus Babel is not true. Then we might have something to dig into. But because, Bodhi, you've already decided that any legend about the splitting of languages must therefore go back to Babel and be a corruption from Babel, none of them are evidence anymore. They're just not incompatible with your argument, even though I would argue many of them actually have very little in common with Babel at all.
To quote some guy named Dan, they just need the tiniest sliver of not impossible.
Well, I mean, yeah. And I would argue that in some cases, it's not actually clear that it is impossible. Team O&B Formula 1 dog racing.
No, go ahead.
For $5 says, Darwin, Bodhi needs to attend the doctors, Kipp and Josh school for apologetics who don't Bible good. With the Bible, book emoji. And a Godzilla.
Apologists who don't Bible good, that's great.
I'll take
Naramda puts in the chat, says, chart and table is redundant. Yeah, a chart is in the following table. Like,
yeah, it's less than ideal. All right. Anyway, let's take a look at this. Aztec, Central America. Quote: Humanity
more
was
like Mexico, but I'll let him have it.
Look, I'm pretty sure for Bodhi, Central America is anything south of the U.S.-Mexico border.
I want to read this.
Okay.
Humanity was wiped out by a flood, but one man, Koshkoshti, and one woman, Xochiquetzal, escaped in a boat. They reached a mountain called Colhuacan. They had many children who were dumb until the time when a dove on top of a tree made them the gift of languages. But these differed so much that the children could not understand each other. Authority Shepherd?
Yeah, that's that
Commander
Shepherd woman.
Shepherd confirmed?
Well, Pam Shepherd in this case, but yeah.
The final Pam Shepherd.
Yes. Like, okay, So I get that you've got a flood myth, which again is a pretty common cross-cultural thing because lots of people experience floods. And they have many children, so that's very different. And the children didn't build a city, nor could they all speak the same language. They couldn't speak at all. And then a dove, not God, gives them languages. So this is very little like the actual story of the Tower of Babel. There's a somewhat of a Noah's flood connection, but not very similar. You want to do...
Also, did we just discover the name of Noah's wife?
Well...
Xochiquetzal? That's Flowerbird?
Maybe, yeah, sure, why not?
Call her Flowerbird.
Alright. Now we have to figure out how to say that in Hebrew, so that way we can pretend that that was the name that should have been in the Bible.
Okay. I'll do my best.
Okay. I feel like flower and bird...
offhand the name for bird.
Yeah. I feel like flower is right there. Wait, isn't it like oaf?
Yeah, but it's there's different words for bird. So you kind of have to be like Sephora is like female bird.
Well, that might
but
work
there's
better.
like bird, fowl, sparrow, eagle, owls, like there's different. Yeah, so like there's also oaf can be a bird, which is where it just means like wing. So you've got the
winged
ophanim,
things.
which are winged thingies. The Baal Kanaf. So that's talking about types of wings or extensions of a limb. So...
Yeah, but Vishanti, Hebrew only has like 300 words. It's a very low vocabulary language, and there's not that many ways that you can express any given idea in Hebrew. So I don't know what you're going on about. Sorry.
Perach is the modern, or is the modern Hebrew word for flower.
All right, well, what about the Maidu natives? Do you want to read this, or should I?
You can go for it.
Western North Africa. Suddenly, in the night, everybody began to speak in a different tongue, except that each husband and wife talked the same language. Then he called each tribe by name and sent them off in different directions, telling them where to dwell. Authority Shepherd. Okay, so no context. One night, everyone wakes up speaking different languages. I assume that there is more to that story, but that's just a story about different languages coming about supernaturally, which, by the way, all etiologies are going to have a supernatural origin for all these different languages. That doesn't mean anything, other than that you have a collection of etiologies. You want to do Quiches, or should I?
Quiches. When the tribes multiplied and left their own old home to a place called Tulan, here the language changed and the people sought new homes in various parts of the world as a result of not being able to understand each other.
Wasania, East Africa. That of all the old tribes of the earth knew only... That of old, there should be a comma there. All the tribes of the earth knew only one language, but during a severe famine, the people went mad and wandered in all directions, jabbering strange words, and so the different languages arose. So in this case, it's because they went insane after nearly starving to death. That sounds nothing like Babel.
Yeah, that's
we're
definitely not the same thing.
Other than the theme of etiology for multiple languages, Bodhi, what are the connections between this story that you see? Does Bodhi think that if there had been no Tower of Babel, that ancient people would have a good understanding of historical linguistics and therefore not bother to come up with etiologies as to why people speak different languages? Because, what would Bodhi expect if he were wrong? That's a question that I really don't think many creationists have ever even thought of, right? What would the world be like if you were wrong? How would it not be like the world we have today? And I don't think they've thought about it. And in many cases, I think if they did, they would be hard-pressed to come up with a single answer for anything. If evolution actually were true, how would the world today be different? If the Earth really were 4.5 billion years old, how would the Earth today be different? If languages actually arose as a result of normal linguistics, like historical linguistic language change, sound changes, semantic shifts, borrowings, all that stuff, how would the world be different than if all the language, at least families, had come about spontaneously at Babel? I don't think any of them have ever thought about it, and I don't think there's a good answer. Meldeborn, who's been a member for 31 months and is at the Sauropsid level, says, I enjoy listening to Dapper, not a linguist dinosaur and company, talking about languages. Well, thank you. Great background conversation to listen to while I do spring cleaning. Yeah. I mean, look, that's one of the reasons why a lot of my videos are long form, because one of the ways I like to consume YouTube is while I'm doing other things. And so I figure, hey, if that's what I want to do with YouTube, and that's what I want people to be able to do with my YouTube channel. Like, if a lot of times, if there's a video that's less than like 20 minutes, I feel like, nah, that's not long enough. I'm not going to be able to get enough done before that video is done. So, yeah. Lily P, parentheses, Silly Lily, says, I tried asking a creationist, what will disprove you on Quora, and they just acted like they never see it. That doesn't surprise me. Joshua Geese for $5 says, Toulon Rouge. I don't know what Toulon Rouge is. Well, it's like Moulin Rouge, except it's Toulon Rouge. Got it. Got it. Took me a little bit. Yeah, because then we can sing Voulez-vous coucher avec moi? C'est pas. All right.
But in Quechua.
If you know how to say Voulez-vous coucher avec moi ce soir in Quechua, you let me know, because I sure as heck don't.
I only know 2 people who might speak Quechua.
Okay, well, feel free to ask them, I guess.
But I don't know if they're fluent enough to translate from French to Quechua.
Well, I mean, you could just give them the English, which is basically like, "Hey, you want to bang tonight?"
I know what it is. Okay. Yeah, I know what it is.
It's not a complicated sentence. Makir, northeastern India. Higher and higher rose the buildings, till at last the gods and demons feared lest these giants should become the masters of heaven. Now this is a solid connection. Oh, do you have something here? That is intriguing. I want to know more about that. As they were already were of earth, so they confounded their speech and scattered them to the 4 corners of the world. Hence arose all the various tongues of mankind. Authority. Now that is a fascinating one. That actually does sound like there's a connection. The first one here. I want to know more about that, Bodhi. I hope that you have that in a separate chapter, because that is fascinating, and if that's accurately reported, then that actually does sound like there's a real connection, because those are very specific details. Right? Like the buildings getting too big, the gods fearing that these giants would become the masters of the heaven. That is directly parallel to what's going on in Genesis. So I'm in fact, actually, if anyone can look this up, right? And like get me a source about this story, I would be fascinated to learn more about that. Because assuming that that is reported correctly, which given the fact that this was an Answers research journal paper or whatever, I'm skeptical of. But if that's at all accurate, I really do think that's intriguing. Want to do Greece?
Okay. For many ages, men lived at peace, without cities and without laws, speaking one language and ruled by Zeus alone. At last, Hermes introduced diversities of speech and divided mankind into separate nations. God, Hermes.
Once again, absolutely no connection to Babel except for the theme of languages. Polynesia, Pacific island of Hao. Okay, I feel like those should be swapped, but whatever. They made an attempt to erect a building by which they could reach the sky and see the creator god Vatea, or Atea, but the god in anger chased the builders away, broke down the building, and changed their language so that they spoke diverse tongues. Here's the problem with Polynesian myths. Basically, none of them have been recorded from pre-European contact, and European contact generally involved Christian missionaries. Yeah. So one of the problems that we have with basically every single Polynesian myth that we have extant to this day is that all of them have been recorded post-serious contact with missionaries, which means all of them have the potential for having actually been based on the stories from the missionaries and not pre-missionary stories. So while it is interesting how similar they are, it is not clear to me that this is similar because of an independent telling or because this is literally just their version of the Bible story that was told to them by missionaries. So yeah, there is that problem with a lot of Polynesian stuff, especially since, they're the only Polynesian writing system, and we're not even clear that it's technically a writing system, is like Rongo Rongo, which was created and died out on Easter Island and never spread anywhere else. And we can't read it anyway. So like we really don't have any idea what any of the stories of Polynesia were like until Europeans got there and started writing them down after trying to convert people to Christianity with limited success in Polynesia. Christianity didn't really catch on big in Polynesia as near as I can tell. Except I guess in Hawaii, but that's because it was like thoroughly colonized by Americans.
Yep. After being occupied by the frickin' British.
Yeah. And occupied by a pineapple company.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, you want to do Sumerians?
Okay. In those days, the whole universe, the people in unison. What? Okay.
I'm guessing that this is being transcribed from a cuneiform tablet that has lacunae, and that we're just getting what's between the lacunae.
I wouldn't even go that far. I don't think he's competent enough to do that. I think there's.
No, I think Shepard is, though.
Cherry picking. I don't know.
Okay, maybe.
I don't know. Enki, the Lord of Abundance, changed the speech in their mouths and potentially brought contention into the speech of man that until then had been one.
Okay, again, no connection. So far, we've had one and maybe a half connection to anything to do with the Tower of Babel. Gaiko, Southeast Asia. In the days of Pandanman, the people determined to build a pagoda that should reach up to heaven. When the pagoda was halfway up to heaven, I wonder how tall that is, specifically. God came down and confounded the language of the people so that they could not understand each other. Then the people scattered, and Than Maorai, the father of Gaiko tribe, came west with 8 chiefs and settled the valley of Setang. This would also be another one that I would be interested to learn more about, because that actually does have some actual connections. So we're up to 2. We're basically at 2 out of 9 so far that actually seem to have more than just a passing connection of languages. And here's yet another one from Greece. You want to get this one, and then we'll take a quick break?
Okay. In the days of old, the gods had the whole earth distributed among them by allotment. There was no quarreling, for you cannot rightly suppose that the gods did not know what was proper for each of them to have. We already read this. This is from Critias. Or knowing this, that they would seek to procure for themselves by contention that which more properly belonged to others. They, all of them, by just apportionment obtained what they wanted, and people to their own districts. Now, different gods had their allotments in different places, which they set in order. It's just quoting the Critias. Yeah,
that's just another Critias source. I don't know why we're doing it again. But hey, let's take a quick break. We will be right back. I will freshen up my drink. Take this as an opportunity to grab whatever snacks or drinks you need. And currently, we are only at 6 out of 20 super chats to get Vishanti to finally play Mass Effect. So,
they know that I have a problem with video games in that once I start, I tend not to stop. So they're just looking out for me.
But here's the thing. Well, if we do it only when we're on a call together, then you can't play when you're not on the call with me. So that's an automatic check on that. Are you saying you would...
bless your heart.
You would cheat on me with Mass Effect?
It's literally sitting in my Steam library right now.
Yeah. That doesn't answer the question.
You can't stop me from playing it when you're not on a call.
I know, but I would hope that you wouldn't betray me like that.
That's not how compulsions work.
All right. We're going to be right back.
If people could control them, they wouldn't be called compulsions.
We'll be right back. We are back, and we've got from Turkey Sloth, who's been a member for 18 months. No Kipp today? No Kipp today. Kipp is off being chased by Sasquatch, or potentially being devoured by the lone surviving stellar sea cow, or some other thing like that. Maybe helping set up polling places? I don't know. Demon Trigger for $5 says, I'm soon going to be going on strike for a few days. Support your local unions. Absolutely. Look, if there's a union striking near you, most unions have resources to support strikers with things like groceries, or even a fund to help them recover financially what they're losing from going on strike, right? Because while generally speaking, if you're on strike with a union at a union job, you can't be fired, they're also not paying you for that time generally, because you're not at work. And most union contracts don't include that you're paid to strike, which, I mean, I can see why no company would ever agree to we pay you to strike, because then it would just be constant. Well, not constant, but strikes would be much easier to do. And I do think that, a strike should be a big decision, right? It shouldn't be something that you just do all the time out of whim. It's a big thing. It's a big deal. So, I don't begrudge companies not allowing people to be paid while on strike, but still, those people still need support. And so if you notice that there's, especially one in your area, right? Because it's easier to help out when you're local to an area. So there's a strike going on near you, look into it. And generally speaking, I support strikers. I don't think I've ever found a strike where I was like, oh no, the company was totally in the right this whole time. But I guess it's possible. I won't rule it out that it's ontologically impossible, but whatever. But then, yeah, if you support that strike, there are a number of ways that you can help out. And so, contact the union office and see if there's something you can do. You can also go to the picket line and help with holding up signs or the chants or whatever, do the protest with the picketers.
Giving out water, snacks, sunscreen.
So, yeah, if you want to be in solidarity with a union, you do not have to join the union. You don't have to even be involved in that industry. There are still ways you can help. So, yeah, because, quite frankly, unless people stick together, nothing's going to change. And that can be as simple as handing out water bottles at a local strike, or it can be calling your elected representatives, it can be protesting. Do what you can. Dutch Man that's never saw a snow tunic for $5 says, what's your favorite Polynesian culture? Mine is Maori. F you, Matt Walsh. I mean, I guess I've never really thought about what my favorite Polynesian culture is. It's never come up. I mean, there's a lot about Native Hawaiian culture that I like, although a lot of that is just that I've been to Hawaii, whereas to say I've never been to New Zealand. I do think the Maori have a very cool aesthetic going on with a lot of the tattoos. Although then it got bastardized into those ugly ass white people tribal tattoos. Which,
however, I will say the Maori
great.
are pretty freaking based with their haka.
Yeah, although no one does the haka the traditional way anymore.
There's no quicker way to get a bunch of people hyped than having them witness a haka.
Yeah, but like I said, they don't do it the traditional way, which is it should all be naked men fully erect. Yelling and dancing.
And that will absolutely intimidate your enemies.
Yes, it will. You're just covered in war paint, you're otherwise completely naked, fully erect, and dancing menacingly. I would turn around and be like, you know what?
Shouting and stomping.
Yeah. I'd be like, you know what? Maybe I don't need this conflict. Maybe I'm just going to go turn around.
Aroused.
Yeah. Yeah. They've got that murder boner.
Get aroused. One of the first in history to ever do it.
So yeah, I guess the answer is I don't think I have one because I've never really thought about it. But there's definitely stuff that I like about. For instance, I like the fact that a lot of Polynesian cultures have managed to turn things like shark teeth into things like scissors and spear points and stuff. That's really cool. I like that. Or use shark skin as a sandpaper, because if you rub it one way, it's smooth, but the other way, it's very rough. You can polish things with it like that. That's very cool. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, where were we? Inca. We already got this. We're skipping it. Gurko Karen's Burma. I'm sorry, but that's an unfortunate name. The Gurko Karens.
I'm trying not to.
It's oh no. in which the people decided to build a pagoda that would reach to heaven. Their god, in his wrath, came down, confused their languages, scattered the people around the earth, and asked to see the manager. Wangongo. It is said that the Wangongo wanted to see what the moon was. Okay, so that's very different. And so fastened one pole to another until everyone in the village was climbing the poles. With that much weight, it is said the tower...
Let's get down to business to behold the moon.
His throne.
That's right.
It is said that the tower suddenly
These
collapsed.
are just... Now I understand why David Lynch tweeted, I'm going to try to go out this weekend and find out if I'm connected to the moon. And then, like, the next day, I think I'm connected to the moon. He did it. Nice. He built the poles.
But also, there's nothing about the languages in this one. The languages thing doesn't even happen. I'm taking a drink. Come on, Bodhi.
They were just trying to climb up to the moon.
There's the only connection here is people wanted to go up high. That's it. That's the only connection. It wasn't just like prove themselves and their worthiness to all the nations and make themselves like the gods. There was no confusion with the languages. It was literally like people were like, "Hey, how high could we get with a pole and could we reach the moon?" And then the answer was no. Like that's it. That's not even an ideology for the origin of languages. My goodness. Mexico.
Yeah.
They built a tower out of clay to reach... Oh, but that's where the... Okay, the only part of this that's actually in quotations is they built a tower out of clay. The rest of this is apparently commentary by whoever the heck Martin is.
Just... That's why... I don't trust these sources that Bodhi's citing.
Yeah, you shouldn't. They're completely untrustworthy. We just got 5 Dapper Dinosaur memberships from Joshua Geese. Thank you so much. That really does mean a lot.
Mistress Kaylee for the win. Who said it was actual poles? Maybe they made blunts and got high burning poles. I'm about that. I'm about that life. Let's do it. I love that, Mistress Kaylee.
Is that an option in Southeast Asia? I don't even know. Like, I guess it is, because cannabis is an old world plant, right?
Uh-huh. It is.
All right. Then, yeah. Although, you know about the cocaine mummies? How'd they get that coca? Where'd that come from?
Ancient aliens confirmed.
Look, that's one of those things where it's like, I don't know the answer. I don't think the answer is necessarily like secret ancient Atlanteans, but it's a good damn question. And as far as I know, we still don't have an answer to it, and I want an answer. Why do those mummies have cocaine? That's weird. Suspicious. Something's going on. All right. Mexico, India, just all of India.
Yeah, just all of it.
People do not realize that India is... The only reason we think of India as one place is because of the British Raj, really.
Yep.
To a lesser extent, you know, the Mughal control over the subcontinent. But, like, on its own, India is not a homogenous place. Not at all. It's full of groups of vastly different religious traditions, vastly different languages. I mean, granted, you know, they're in
even the way
to
that they practice Hinduism varies wildly.
Yeah, really, the only reason...
if you try going and studying the people in Punjab and the way that they do stuff and their language and stuff, and then just jump over to Tamil Nadu, that's not going to be the same at all.
Yeah. Really, the only reason that we call Hinduism like a single thing is because it was easier for first Muslim and then later European colonizers to treat all of those indigenous religious traditions as sort of kind of the same thing. It was just easier for them that way. They're not actually all the same thing. So in India, a Hindu legend tells of a group of demons that attempted to build an altar that would reach the sky, but whose completion was thwarted by Indra, the sky god. So this isn't even people. There's nothing about languages, and it's not even people. Okay, cool. That's nothing. Tells of a great tower made of masts. This is the Bai Luyi of South Africa. Southern Africa, sorry, not South Africa. So, you know. Because of its instability, it falls down and kills all the people who were involved in the project. The purpose of the tower was to reach the sun god Nyambe, though it is not Nyambe who punishes them. The destruction of the tower arises instead from the natural consequences of their actions. So again, literally nothing to do with this, except that there was people wanted to go up. Cool. But again, Greece, which is just the exact same story again. That doesn't count as a new story, Bodhi, because you're quoting less of it. Taking another drink for this. My goodness. Kacha Nagas. Which is you got to be very careful when you say that second word, especially on YouTube. Yeah, Southeast Asia.
I am so Spanish brain that I would have accidentally mispronounced that as nalgas. If you know, you know.
Told of a story. I guess just the
somebody
subject
or
of this,
something told of a story. Okay.
The subject, I guess, is just Kacha Nagas. Told of a story in which a band of warriors attacking a python suddenly found themselves to be speaking different languages. The men of the same speech, it says, now drew apart from the rest and formed a separate band. Oh, there have been, 2 stories, maybe 3, that have actually sounded like there might be a connection to the Tower of Babel out of 18 so far. And this is with Bodhi having the option to cherry pick, right? Like, you gotta realize, Bodhi is in control of what goes into this.
He should have brought his strongest argument, and this is what he comes up with.
Yeah, this is it. This is, like, nothing. It's not technically nothing, because there's, like, 3 stories in here, maybe, that I would like to know more about. But so much of this, there's just... How long does this keep going on for? One more page. Winnebago natives, Midwestern North America. Earthmaker then sent the man into the world. When he came to the very center, there he was split and dispersed, and thus all the different peoples and all the languages came into existence. This is a story about the origin of humanity, which coincides with the origin of different languages, and it's about a guy being torn into pieces, and then the pieces growing into new people. This has more in common with the story of the Myrmidons from Greek mythology than it does with the story of the Tower of Babel. Munduruku natives, Central South America. So is that like Brazil? Like the Amazon? Is that what that means? Central South America?
I guess.
The place where Karasakaibo stamped his foot is in the village of the Necodemos. There, the people climbed up a rope from the underworld, and the Munduruku Indians are the ones who Karasakaibo tattooed to look like himself. The rest, some white, some black, ran off in different directions. That doesn't have the origin of humans. It doesn't have a tower or the origin of languages. What? There's no connection. I'm taking a drink. What is... We got a few super chats here. The Greek god Joe for 100 Argentinian pesos says, Bodhi just copy-pasted whatever Shepard gave him. Then copy-pasted what Martin gave him and didn't even put anything in an order that made sense. On Vishanti, I also read that as Kachas Nalgas.
I knew you would.
Cognitive trifurcation for 199 says, this is just cribbed from a 1918 book, that's why. Oof.
Yeah.
Bodhi
creation is always on the bleeding edge of any scholarly field.
It's so bad that...
Mm-hmm.
Man, and like, it's not like it's never appropriate to cite an older work, right? Because often it is. One of the examples I often give is like in when you're doing biology stuff, right? You always cite the first person to describe an organism or to name an organism when you talk about that organism, right? Which means very frequently you're citing works from like the 1800s. That's fine. It's what you're supposed to do in that context. But if you're then going to cite as your argument for like the ecology of the new dinosaur that you found, a paper about paleoecology from like 1820, what are you doing? No. Cite something more up to date. Roshina hashtag upset Keller for 499 says, so Bodhi is saying that the dream to reach the sky after seeing birds and mountains is absolutely not unique. No, it has to be from other cultures. No human would on their own look up at the sky and say, gee, that's neat, I wonder what's up there, or what it would be like to be up there, like a bird. Or has ever looked at a mountain and be like, man, I'll bet the view up there is really cool. I should build something like that so I can get up there. Nope. No one has ever thought of that unless they learned it from the Bible. Yep. Okay. Ona natives. Southern South America. Kinos was the first man sent to the world by Temokul apostrophe for, I don't know what that's supposed to mean. To put things in order, so Kinos created the plants and animals and gave the Ona their own land. Kauch, I'm not sure, came after him. He was the mythical hero who divided the land into 39 hunting sections and assigned each Ona family one of them. Not even any new languages, not even a tower. No connection. Nothing. No flood. There is nothing to connect this to the Bible. Unless we want to say that anytime anyone has an explanation for where anything came from, then that therefore is derived from the Bible. But that seems like an absurdly broad standard. Mesopotamia, from the Epic of Gilgamesh. The buildings of this temple offended the gods. In a night they threw down what had been built, they scattered them abroad and made strange their speech, the progress they impeded. So this is almost certainly directly connected to the Bible. Of course, the problem is that this is almost certainly from long before the Bible being written, so if the only obvious way for the borrowing to go is from here to the Bible, but, Okay. Mayo, from East Asia. Lohan then begat Kusa and Messe. Lo-Shan begat Elan and Nga-Shur. Their offspring begotten became tribes and peoples. Their descendants established encampments and cities. Their singing was all with the same tunes and music. Their speaking was all the same words and language. Then they said, "Let us build a very big city. Let us raise into heaven a very high tower." This was wrong, but they reached this decision. Not right, but they rashly persisted. God struck at them, changed their language and assent. Descending in wrath, he confused tones and voices. One speech to the others who hear him has no meaning. He's speaking in words, but they can't understand him. This one also has some interesting connections, but where is this one? Genesis, according to the... Oh. This is that same thing that there's like... Of course I did that. Sorry. This is that same thing that's like, hey, did you know that the Chinese word for like flood is actually about like people in a boat, like 8 people in a boat? And it's like, it's not though. That's just not true.
Yeah.
Like none of that's true. So I don't trust that that's even actually a real story because I know that source, and that source is just full of just outright lies, right? Like not even subtle lies, just lies. Just complete misunderstandings of how Hanzi work. Oh, wait. Yeah, so here's where we are now. Which means it is Vishanti's turn for, like, a paragraph, unless you want to do the next bit, too.
I mean, you read the whole last thing, and that's a lot, so I'll just...
Alright.
I'll keep going. The origin of writing... Ask a secular scholar today when and where written languages first developed, and you will likely get an answer involving Sumerian cuneiform in Sumer in modern-day Iraq. Others may be tempted to say Egypt, whose written languages often claim to have come about the same time.
Yeah, they're neck and neck.
To have come about the same time, or this is not good. You should have added a word to have come about around the same time.
Yeah, around, at.
Or change the word come to arrived or emerged about the same time. God, drive me insane. Still others might say the Phoenicians, of whom it is oft repeated that they were supposedly the first ones to develop an alphabet. Secular scholars won't actually.
Yeah, if you find
name those.
If you find a secular scholar though who says the Phoenicians invented writing, that is a secular scholar you should not believe about anything. Because they invented their alphabet based on using Egyptian hieroglyphics in an alphabetic manner, and also, technically, they invented an abjad, not an alphabet. But Mistress Kaylee, Mistress Kaylee for £10 says, the universe came to be after Colony Ashalot ate a particularly bad taco and had explosive diarrhea, causing the Big Bang, which is why the main message of the universe is shit happens. I'm like, you know what? That is. I think we should make that into the new default creation myth for the world.
Oh my god.
Gotta watch out for those bad tacos.
Wait, who wrote, God, what's the name of the guy who wrote the book about the whales and the fallen planet? And,
Douglas Adams.
Thank you. That's a Douglas Adams coded post.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It is.
Kudos. Cheers. Okay. A problem. But there is a problem.
Oh, no.
Each of these is a post-flood civilization that emerged post-Babel. They are made up of descendants of Cush, Mitzrayim, and Canaan, Noah's grandsons, respectively.
Okay. I don't see how that's a problem, but sure.
This doesn't fit with my mythology, which obviously is true. So consider the immense amount of history prior to this. Before the flood, there were about 1,656 years of history where people were speaking. Is it reasonable to assume that they were not writing at all during that entire time? This is a bold assumption.
It is very reasonable to assume that, even if it's true, right? Because here's why. We know of many, many, many non-literate cultures today who have been speaking languages for far longer than Bodhi supposes this pre-flood period is, and they didn't invent writing either, because writing isn't something that everyone just comes up with easily. We know this for a fact because we know of cultures where it doesn't happen, where no one came up with it. The reason the Cherokee syllabary looks so much like its weird distorted versions of Latin letters is because the guy who invented it was working with a non-literate culture who had never been literate at all and hadn't even had the idea of literacy until he got it from the Europeans, whom he saw using squiggles to basically encode the sound of their languages, and he said, hey, I could do that for my language. But he didn't even bother to learn how the Latin alphabet worked, which is why he made a syllabary and not an alphabet. We know that this is how humans work. The idea of writing spreads like wildfire once a culture invents it and other cultures find it useful. But the initial invention of it is virtually impossible. It happens so rarely. We know this. This isn't a bold assumption. That's just the standard. The basic human culture does not invent writing. It takes specific cultural impetus, or it takes influence from other cultures. This is one of the very few places where diffusion is one of the only ways that a culture can actually gain this technology, right? That's not generally the case for like the wheel, for stonemasonry, for carpentry, for, milling flour. Most of these things are all things that can come about independently and have come about independently countless times. Writing isn't one of those things. Writing is extraordinarily rare, and it almost never is invented. But it is very frequently adopted. And it pisses me off that Bodhi is getting this one wrong too, because you don't even have to worry about like archaeology and ancient history. You can just go look at the world today. Just do it. Just go look at the world today. There are plenty of non-literate cultures right now, today. Even cultures that are non-literate within their own language, but that are also in contact with literate languages. A lot of the tribe people in the Amazon do not have a writing system for their own language, despite many of them learning Portuguese, and in some cases even being somewhat literate in Portuguese. That still did not filter back to their own language. Sorry. I'm going to take a drink for this. Reading. And yeah, you keep reading.
Yeah. Okay. Granted, any records prior to the flood that may have been written were surely destroyed in the devastating year-long flood recorded in Genesis chapters 6 through 8. That is, of course, unless some documents were carried through the flood aboard the ark. Okay. I love this headcanon. I do. It's highly likely that Noah and his family took some sort of recorded information about the ark. Yeah, duh, it's the tablets and the writings of Adam. Gosh.
You do realize that this isn't in the Bible, and the only reason Bodhi wants to believe it is because this lets him and other creationists get around the problems with the Mosaic authorship of parts of Genesis, as well as allow them to pretend that the primeval history is in fact a bunch of first-hand accounts and not actually something that was made up a long time after. There's actually no textual and even less historical reason to suppose any of this is true. It's just made up because it would be convenient for young Earth creationists if it were true. That's literally the only reason that anyone believes this.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
As well, it would be difficult to believe that God... I don't like the way he started this sentence. As well. Come on, man.
Yeah.
Okay. As well, it would be difficult to believe that God, who places such an emphasis on his written word, example Mark 12:26 to the first power, as well as the living word, example John 1:14 squared, would be so negligent as to forget such things as the creation of writing to those who are made in the image of God, Genesis 9:6 cubed. Far be it, indeed. On the secular side, I understand
there indeed?
are those...
That's not a sentence.
Far be it indeed.
I'm taking a drink. What the... What? That broke me.
Far be it indeed. Mm-hmm. Far be it indeed.
Okay, keep going. I'm sorry.
Okay. On the secular side, I understand that there are those who are willing to forget that God is the creator and who suppress knowledge, Romans 1. But sadly, even within the church, there are those dissenters who agree with the secular world that writing was not invented until after the flood by those early cultures. However, they should have no excuse.
Bodhi, you are putting the idea of a literate antediluvian culture as on the same level as what's actually in the Bible. There is nothing about this in the Bible. And even if I accept that you're a biblical literalist, which, by the way, Bodhi isn't, can tell because he's not a flat earther who disbelieves in time zones, which he would kind of have to be, because the Bible talks about, where the sun sets. It talks about the circle of the earth. And also earlier in that same work, it talks about balls as not being the same thing as circles. It talks about a solid crystalline dome, which, by the way, I know that Will Duffy has recently issued a challenge to find any Jewish source that talks about a crystalline dome over a flat earth. Vishanti, how easy is it to find Jewish works about that?
Trivially.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know because I found them like 2 years ago and sent them to Dapper, who at the time was like, oh, okay, thanks. And I was excited, and I remain so.
I'm newly excited because it means I might have an excuse to dunk on Will Duffy because, let's face it, he is also a pseudoscientist, even if he's done some pretty cool stuff recently.
As a time-traveling Jew from space,
of course,
it's incumbent upon me to give you information well in advance of when you actually need it. And then you later discover, oh, that's what that was for.
Well, I think you're safe from being forced to play Mass Effect, because we only got a minute and a half, and we're missing 8 super chats. So I don't think 8 super chats are going to come in a minute and a half. But Dutchman that's never saw Snow Tunic for $2 says, this Bodhi guy isn't too smart, huh? With a Godzilla. And no, he's really not. And then Dia Wing for $2 says, if it's not written, it's not history, Bodhi, which is technically true. And then bag of aubergines, and we'll take a drink for that too. So, yeah, Bodhi is just... Okay, it's already iffy from a theological standpoint for Bodhi to add in things that the text doesn't say. Right? But it's super way worse when he's then like, and every Christian should accept this, and all the secular scientists and Christians who disagree, well, that's a shame. They're suppressing the truth.
They shouldn't have an excuse for believing different than me, the correct one.
Me, the correct one, who's just adding random nonsense into the Bible that's nowhere in there. Nothing in the Bible indicates in any way that Noah or Adam or anyone else was writing stuff down until we get to, like, God writing the Decalogue or whatever on the stone tablets, right? Like, that's just... in fact, I actually think that the first person who actually is recorded as writing anything in the Torah is God writing on the tablets at Mount Sinai. Is anyone else ever recorded as writing anything in any story in the Torah prior to that?
Offhand, I can't think of any, but that doesn't mean that isn't a thing.
Well, how about this? I'm not aware of any such story, although it's possible I've forgotten one. I've read the whole thing, but like, hey, it's been a little while since I've read it through. So if anyone else can think of a story before the giving of the law at Sinai, in which someone is actually talked about writing stuff down explicitly in the Torah, which I guess would just at this point be in Genesis or Exodus, let me know. Because I'm not aware of it, but what do I know? Now Hart, for 50 secs, thank you very much, says, behold the truth of AIG, the rot of woe, the bag of dicks, far be it indeed, to grief relay, if AIG gets their way. Thank you very much, and we will take a drink. It was very poetic.
Excellent prose. Poetic verse.
Here we go.
My brain is broken today.
Mistress Kaylee for £5 says, behold the literal word of God. No, you're reading it wrong. What God meant to say was...
Exactly. Okay. I'm going to keep going. Just scroll down a little bit.
All right.
So we had a problem. Now here's the solution.
Mm-hmm.
In just the 5th chapter of Genesis, the answer presents itself. This is the book of the genealogy of Adam. In the day that God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. Genesis 5:1. Checkmate atheist.
That doesn't say anything
Even
about
Adam. It's because it's referencing a book, therefore it was written down, therefore Adam or someone close to him must have written it. Checkmate, atheist.
It doesn't say that, though. It doesn't say that. It just says this is the book of. Look, if I said this is a book about also, Gilgamesh, that doesn't mean I met Gilgamesh.
The word is not. You know what? I don't even care. I'm not even going to correct this. I just don't care. I just don't care. Even Adam, the first man, could write. Citation needed.
Well, he gave you the citation. It's Genesis 5:1. It just doesn't say that.
Okay. It's fine. Even Adam, the first man, could write, and we have a portion of what he wrote being edited by Moses into the Pentateuch, specifically the book of Genesis to the fourth power. This is what is expected from the God who calls himself the Word, John 1:1 through 3 to the fifth power, and vigorously uses the written word of God as the authority. Example, Matthew 4:4 to the 6th, 7 to the 7th, 10 to the 8th. People made in his image should be able to not only speak words, but also write them down in a coherent language format, obviously.
Okay, is he implying that people who aren't literate are not made in the image of God? Because that's really what it sounds like. Because I don't think if you asked Bodhi if that's what he meant, that he would agree. But it seems like a really obvious implication of this paragraph, that people who can't read are not made in the image of God, or that people who have some, perhaps, mental handicap that prevents them from being able to learn how to read, maybe they have, like, severe dyslexia, or maybe they're, like, whatever, right? That those people are no longer made in the image of God.
I bet Bodhi is ableist to the point that he would say that any kind of, like, neurodivergence or neurological issues is part of the fall. He is that ableist. I'm willing to stand by that.
I'm going to take a drink for Bodhi just implying that both non-literate cultures and basically anyone with any kind of cognitive divergence that makes it hard for them to read is just less than human.
Yep.
Hey, Bodhi.
So the implication,
just real quick,
is that
I want to point out that hey, Bodhi, you know how you like to pretend that you're the real non-racists while ignoring the long history of people using the Bible to justify racist policies? Hey, buddy, guess what it means when you say that the image of God is tied to the ability to read and write? It means you're making the exact same racist arguments that you pretend you don't make. I'm sorry, that one really pisses me off.
Yep.
Made a Geeky Platypus Warlock for $2.
If it didn't require me also being ableist, I would love to flip that on Bodhi and just be like, yeah, well, you're not literate in the Lashon Kodesh, so who's not made in the image of God now?
I mean, based on this book,
that's also ableist.
Based on this book, he's barely literate in English.
Yeah.
Meta Geeky Platypus Warlock for $2 says, poor babies, no read, spawns of Satan. It's true.
Somewhere Noam Chomsky is just clutching his head in pain.
Poor guy. All right, here we go. Let's go with
the implication. The implication of this is that Adam's descendants also had the ability to write. So literacy is just passed on genetically?
No, because look at the next clause.
Are we back to Lamarckianism?
Nope, look at the next clause.
Unless they individually failed to learn to read and write.
Right. Which is
reasonable to expect in some cases in a sin-cursed and broken world.
So which is it, Bodhi?
It's reasonable. Is it?
Bodhi, if it's a sign of the image of God to be able to do a thing, it shouldn't be the kind of thing you can just kind of forget to learn. If the image of God means anything, then it seems pretty obvious to me that it needs to be some kind of intrinsic thing to the thing you think is made in the image of God, right? That you can't just forget to do and then therefore lose the imago Dei. Right? Like, originally the conception really was that the image of God was that, humans look like God. But you know what? Christians have made more philosophical ideas about that. And you know what? I actually kind of appreciate that. I think those are better ideas. I think that they're more inclined towards treating humans better overall than just, well, they kind of look like God. Because what does that get you?
Dapper.
What?
Let me read the next sentence. There is such illiteracy in today's still sin-cursed world. That is a correct prediction by me.
Yeah, it is. Take a drink.
That
Also,
Bodhi's ableism is... Yep.
So we'll take a drink.
I called it.
Also, another
What did I
correct
hate
prediction
being right all the time.
was that the previous chapter was just going to be him grabbing whatever ideologies that he could with absolutely no attempt to actually connect them to the Bible. So we'll take another drink there.
I hate being right all the time.
Now, Hart, for 50 secs, thank you very much, says, Bodhi seemed to go from haha funny to the guy who would beat left-handed children in the 19th and 20th century real quick. Horrifying. Yeah, no, that's the thing. Because fundamentally, the people who would beat left-handed children in the 19th and early 20th centuries have the same basic ideological thrust as Bodhi, which is taking whichever traditions about the Bible that they've received and taking them unquestioningly, hyper-literally, and taking that to its logical conclusion, no matter how horrifying that might be. The only difference is that Bodhi didn't receive the tradition that left-handedness is evil. If he had, I'm sure he would have found Bible verses to support it. Would they actually have supported it? No, probably not. But does it matter to Bodhi?
Real quick, before you read the super chat, Prixie Burning Purple says, hey, Vishanti Dapper Dinosaur, I found the Bakir myth in the 1923 book. The author says it is post-missionary story, probably based off the biblical story.
Oh,
Bam!
Shocking. That's a confirmed prediction. I'm drinking for that. Thank you very much.
Yep.
All right. Roshina, hashtag upset Keller for $4.99. Would Bodhi claim cognitive divergence is a demon possession? Maybe. I don't know for certain, but I definitely wouldn't rule it out. Kent, free math tutor for Jeff Halstead for $4.99 says, to be fair to Bodhi, his writing is almost as good as my bachelor's degree 10-page essay. Okay, but did you have the option of hiring a professional editor? Because he sure did. Because this was an actual book that AIG paid to have published. Nita, member for 24 months, who's at the Tetrapod level, says, this book makes me feel better about my English. Well, I'm glad.
Awesome. Yeah, this is why anybody who speaks English as a second or even third or fourth language that's like, oh, sorry, my English isn't good. I'm like, baby, your English is better than a crap load of English speakers.
Yeah. Team OMB, Formula 1 dog racing for $5 says, I had the Imago day, but then I took an arrow to the knee. Oh,
amazing.
I have the best audience.
Yes.
That's why I'm always excited whenever I go to another live stream and I see my audience members. I'm like, hey! And also, I'm not always there, like, openly. Sometimes I'm lurking, and I still see you there.
Okay, scroll up just a smidge.
Sorry.
Okay. Do you want to read this Mistress Kaylee chat first, or?
Yeah, sure. For £5, Mistress Kaylee says, Bodhi level intellectual, I read good because me smart. You know smart because you know read good. What do you mean, theory of relativity? Yeah.
Okay. But language began at the beginning when God programmed into Adam and Eve the ability to speak and communicate with him and each other right from the start. They were programmed with perfect knowledge, not to be confused with infinite knowledge, but essentially what was sufficient per God at creation.
Do you think they also knew Kung Fu?
The extent of the knowledge this side of heaven, but what is known is that mankind was able to communicate with a language, and furthermore that they were able to write it down as a record just as Adam did, as was revealed to us through the Holy Spirit by Moses in Genesis 5:1 to the 9th hour.
It wasn't, because it doesn't say that. It does not say... Jesus.
So many assumptions and presuppositions, and I'm going to keep going. Post-flood languages. It makes sense that the languages that came out of Babel could also be written down, since they too are from the mind of God.
No, hold on.
It makes the most sense. Does it make sense?
Well, it makes sense that they could be written down, because any language can be written down. But is that the same as it makes sense that the people who spoke those languages immediately were able to make writing systems for those languages? Because I'm not sure that follows. But yeah, also, in principle, yeah, any language could be written down. If all these languages
came from the mind of God, why are people so busted up about having different languages anyway? If it came from the mind of God, doesn't that mean it's inherently a good thing?
Also,
in their mind?
if God has omniscience, doesn't that mean he also could know every possible language that could ever be formed? Which means that there's really nothing special
God's an omniglot.
He would have to be. Which means there's also nothing special about a language coming from the mind of God, because literally every language can come from the mind of God, even the ones that are stupid or not able to be processed in real time by humans, like Ichthuil. Like, so, okay, cool, I guess. That doesn't mean anything. DM Wing for $5 says, I listened to this live stream while doing yard work. Confirmed prediction. Yeah, kind of, about people doing... Yeah, we'll take a drink for it. That's a confirmed prediction. I'll take it. I'm thirsty.
A bag of Kent and 2 mats.
Ooh.
Is that 2 of the same mat? Because that's inflation for you, but also if it's not, then yeah.
I think it's
2 mats being worth 1 Kent is really saying something about the value of Kent.
I think it's both the mats, like Raw Mat and Matt Powell.
Okay. Right. For whatever reason, my brain read that as the same Matt twice, and I was like, yeah, that tracks if it's Matt Powell.
Oh, man, that guy.
Okay. Let me keep going. It makes the most sense that as people travel to various parts of the world, many peoples and tribes lost the ability to write and merely retain the ability to speak. What?
I'm going to be honest. It is not common for a culture to lose the ability to write. I can only think of it happening twice. It happened in Greece, and it happened on Easter Island, or Rapa Nui. And I'm not aware of any other times where... I'm not aware of any other times where we know that a literate culture lost the ability to read. Now, there are other times where we have, say, the Indus Valley civilization. They seem to have had a writing or proto-writing system that didn't survive until today. But it's not clear whether that's because that group of people lost the ability to read, or because they adopted other systems, or because their civilization was largely destroyed and they scattered into other groups, and therefore that group no longer really persisted. It's not clear what happened there. So there are a lot of writing systems that went extinct, but it's not always clear if that means that the people lost literacy skills, because those aren't the same thing. So it's not terribly common for literacy to be completely deleted out of a culture. It has happened, but it's not very common. And also for $2.22, My Unfinished Journey says, Hail Nero, Daps, and Vish, and hail Yard Work. Thank you very much. All right, sorry, keep going.
Okay, let me get going. God, this is so bad. There are examples of this throughout history where it was often the elite in society who were able to read and write. Yeah, it's pretty much always the elite in society who are able to read and write.
Okay, that varies, though. It also varies by writing system. In places where a logography or a largely logographic writing system is a big thing, and there's thousands and thousands of graphemes, then it's very common for literacy to be very restricted. But in cultures with alphabets, it's much less common for basic literacy skills to be restricted to the upper class. And we have things like shopping lists from Canaan on potsherds, notes between medieval peasants in whatever local language, and stuff like that. Just random ass people who own cows making out receipts for the sales in whatever languages. So
writing the world's oldest Yelp review?
Yeah. So the degree to which literacy is the domain of the elites varies both by writing system and by culture. So alphabetic, the closer you are to having an alphabetic system, the more likely it is that the random, commoners could read and write to some extent. The farther towards the system of writing that you get in ancient China or Sumer, where it's mostly logograms and there's thousands of graphemes and whatnot, the more likely it is for only the elite to be able to learn to read, because that would have taken years to learn, as opposed to, not that long if it's just an alphabet.
What I was thinking of specifically is how people living in cities are way more likely to be literate.
Also true.
And when, for instance, the Judean exile happened, almost everybody got ported off to, Babylon or whatever. You have a group of people who went from being a mixture of city folk and country folk. So there's a mixture of literacy rates. And then the people returning are overwhelmingly literate. And then that literacy rate, again, starts to diversify because people go back to being not just in a city. They go back to being cities and country folk.
Yeah. Mistress Kaylee for £5 says, to be fair, the reason there's so many spellings in English is the only people that could read and write were the clerics. They couldn't spell. That's actually not entirely true. It is true that at first, writing in English was largely restricted. Like, well, actually, even then, it's iffy, right? Because there are older writing systems that were used to encode languages before English that survived in the earliest stages of English. Things like, the Younger Plutarch were used in some cases to encode sort of like very early Old English. And then as the Latin alphabet grew in influence, it was more and more restricted because the people learning the Latin alphabet were largely monks and clergy. But also, scribes were learning it. Like the Anglo-Saxon chronicles were not primarily written by clergymen. They were written by people whose job it was basically to keep track of what was going on. And then it's also the case that we have cases of people being illiterate. For instance, in the description of the story of Cadman from Bede, Cadman being someone who's said to have written poetry and hymns in English, and therefore to be one of the first people to write verse at a high level in the English language. He's apparently illiterate. But then we also know that there were signs and whatnot in English. And we also know that different spellings were used by commoners in Middle English. And we know that Middle English speakers had some reasonable level of literacy. And we know that by the early modern English period, almost everyone in London, at least, was basically literate to the point that they could pick up a bishop's Bible and read what was in it without having too much trouble.
There are some bangers in chat right now. Timo and B says, Alexamenos worships his god with a horse head emoji.
Well, yeah, there's another thing. That's clearly not written by some fancy pants guy, right? That was clearly written, sprawled in Greek by some Roman soldiers.
And Demon Trigger says, I saw the video talking about ancient dog epitaphs. Yeah, Romans buried their dogs and was like, here's the goodest boy. And there was an article I saw afterwards of a Japanese emperor waxing poetic about his kitty. Yeah, talking about like, his little needles, talking about those little claws and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, humans do love their
Romans
pets.
burying their... Yeah, we do.
And those Roman dog epitaphs are heartbreaking.
I know. Also, the Greek god Jove says, Dapper dinosaur, clerics couldn't spell...
Okay, maybe it was just a D&D joke and I missed it. But yeah, okay, there's that. But also the idea of having like set spellings is actually fairly recent.
Yeah,
that's a very
it
modern
is. You can
idea.
also that's something that I personally can attest to, because when you go a little bit further back in colonial era Spanish, there weren't standardized spellings. That's a very modern invention because Spanish didn't have like standardized spellings, which is frustrating when you're trying to track down records for ancestors because there could be 3 or 4 different ways their surname is spelled.
Yeah. Kent Free Math Tutor
J and X or an S or
Kent Free Math Tutor for Jeff Halstead for $4.99 says, so all this, everything in this book is because God is scared of big buildings. Is that the motivation? Yeah, I mean, that's the motivation given in Genesis. In Genesis, the reason that God wants to get rid of the Tower of Babel is because he's worried that if the tower is completed, then the humans will have power like him. And he doesn't want that. So he stops it because he's scared.
And actually, to be technical, it's the Divine Council because it's the first person plural.
Yeah.
But yes.
Fair. But clearly God is depicted as like the leader of the Divine Council.
Yeah. Okay, let me keep going.
Okay.
There are examples of this throughout history. It was often the elite in society were able to read and write, whereas many commoners, laborers, and slaves were without. Some may raise the comment that it was merely the spoken language that was confused. This comes from the idea of the lip being confused, or the tongue, I think he meant. In Genesis 11:1, it says they had one language in speech. The word for language is lip. It's actually tongue.
Yeah, it's tongue. I don't know why he's saying lip. He's just dumb.
He's just dumb. Now, the whole earth had one language in speech, Genesis 11:1. The end result was that God confused the language. Come, let us go down and confuse their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. Yeah, it just says tongue. So the confusion of the language was that people would not be able to understand what was spoken. Some have thought that this means that any written language was not confused. Basically, the argument is that the people would have spoken differently, but the way they wrote would have remained the same. Why would you write in a language you can't speak?
Because Chinese. That's already a thing that most of China does. So Hanzi is standardized across China, and that is the written language of basically every Han Chinese language. However, Hanzi is actually the written form of Mandarin, and people who speak other Chinese languages basically have a much harder time learning to read because the phonetic components of Hanzi do not work in non-Mandarin languages, and yet they do it anyway. There's also Sumerograms, if you're interested in like Akkadian, where people would write the Sumerian word in an Akkadian text, and you're just supposed to read the Akkadian word, but what's written down is the Sumerian word. So it also happened in Sumer. Look, humans are really weird, and they do all sorts of weird stuff. And chances are, if you think, oh, there's no way that this would ever occur in language, you're probably wrong about that, because just about everything that could happen in a language has happened in some language. Prixie, soulless, dyslexic, purple. Oh no.
No! Oh, no!
Who's been a member for 14 months and is at the tetrapod level, says, spelling tests legit traumatic for me with a Godor. Yeah, they are, and look, I feel different ways about standardized spelling. On the one hand, unless you're going to be a professional author, I don't think it's that important. But on the other hand, it is nice to have standardized spelling so that everyone can agree on how to spell a word even though they pronounce it differently, because it makes the reading across dialects easier. So, like, yeah, it's complicated. Whatever. Keep going, Vishanti, sorry.
Okay, so the confusion of the language was that people would not be able to understand what was spoken. Okay. I think I read this paragraph already, but the Bible does not say one way or another. So to conclude definitively that written languages were still the same may not be wise.
Okay.
Didn't he just make this argument? You know what? I don't care. Here is why. You should use a colon there. If one looks at the writing of various languages across the globe, ...
What is that?
Why? Why are you cutting out your own...
What's missing here?
Comma! Just use a comma! The differences are great. Many do not use the same letters and symbols. Well, duh. Some don't read in the same direction. The grammar varies, and so on. So he's using semicolons here. This is a nightmare. This is an editor's nightmare.
Roshan, hashtag upset Keller for 499 says, Vishanti shouldn't have asked a linguist about writing. She didn't. I'm not a linguist.
I didn't.
There are no linguists here, yeah. I am just a guy who's enthusiastic.
Furthermore, if the languages spoken were confused, then they would have had to translate what they were saying into the alleged common written language to be able to write it. The primary problem is that written language is a reflection of the spoken language, so the idea of a common written language being retained really falls apart.
Like I said, it depends. If the written form is heavily ideographic, then the connection between the spoken form and the written form is weaker, because an ideogram can stand for whatever it stands for in any language, right? So, like, it would be hypothetically possible for me to change, like, pretty much all the nouns in an English sentence written down into the corresponding Hanzi character. And if you knew enough of the Chinese characters, you could read that sentence and know that it's an English sentence with some logograms from Chinese, and it would be just fine.
Let me read at least another paragraph. So when it comes to post-flood languages, there is immense diversity. Some are written left to right, others right to left, some are top down, and so on.
What's the so on,
based
buddy?
On phonetic pronunciation. Yeah.
There aren't too many other languages out there with other options.
Some are based on phonetic pronunciation, while others are based on pictographs, where a symbol or picture represents words and meaning. Grammatical styles are all over the place as well. When God confused the languages of Babel, it was truly confused, even in the written form. Yeah, we all know that the correct direction is right to left.
I want to know what grammatical styles there are that Bodhi knows of. Curious.
I don't think he knows the VSO-SVO distinction.
I don't think so either. I don't even think he knows that Hebrew is standard is verb, subject, object. Like, I think that would go.
Yeah, probably not. He just knows, oh, well, that's right to left. Scroll down a little more. Let me see.
Apparently, I'm still. Section. Yeah, that's a whole chapter.
We did! Yay! All right.
We did it, everybody. I'm taking a whole drink for that just whole nonsense. That was a lot.
That was painful.
Yeah, it really was. I'm just going to scroll up a little bit so future Dapper knows what page to scroll to.
230.
Yep, because the way this works is before every show, I check the last few minutes of the last show to see where we left off. because I'm not writing it down. It's on YouTube. It'll be fine. Matej Milosevic says, am I correct in assuming this is the most exposure this thing has gotten? By the way, AIG is a bag of bodies to disabled people. Like, yes, they are.
Yeah.
Drink. See, the thing is, I don't know. Because AIG is a big deal, right? And this was published by AIG. And this is probably the biggest exposure this book has gotten outside of explicitly Christian circles. And what I mean by explicitly Christian is, this is not a circle where, like, we're here to do Christian stuff. However, Christians are welcome here. You know, provided they're not going to be horrible people, which is that's just the general rule, right? You're going to be a bigot here, or you're going to start harassing people and you're a Christian, yeah, sure, you're out. But generally speaking, being a Christian in no way bars you from being here, and we're welcoming. In fact, two of my main co-hosts, Maddie and Bent, are Christians, and they're co-hosts, right? So, but as far as, like, this isn't a Christian circle in the sense of, like, yeah, we're all Christians here. If you're not a Christian, you might be welcome as a guest, but you don't belong here. In those circles, I think this book probably has had more attention than we've given it. But I do think this might be the most exposure it's gotten to a more skeptical audience, or an audience that is not primarily already accepting what Bodhi thinks.
So, Fibonacci Reductio ad Absurdum 8 notes that the Tzu in Sun Tzu and the Z in Kongzi are the same character pronounced the same way. So for Kongzi, it's Kong Tzu.
Well, I'm not changing it now.
Today I learned, and will probably forget.
That guy at the Utopia Planitia Fleet Yard, that guy screwed it up.
I'm kind of with Greek God Jove on this one. It's like, please just use the IPA. It would be so much easier. But Jillian,
yeah.
Channel Social Secretary Redden, is now sewing Gordon Cole.
Nice. Actually, I was asked earlier who my favorite Twin Peaks character was. It might be Gordon Cole.
Excellent choice.
Yeah, he is really
Excellent
good.
Choice.
Today,
you remind me of a small Mexican chihuahua. I love that the only person that he can hear without yelling is Shelley.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then he does a really weirdly age-appropriate flirtation and attempt at a kiss.
Yeah, he does that in quite a few of his films, but it's not, like, creepy for some reason, but it is a little uncomfortable.
I think because the character is so genuine in the emotion that's being displayed, that it feels
he's genuinely
less...
smitten. He's not, like, creeping.
Yeah. So I think that's a big part of it. So we are going to be wrapping up here. We have a new chapter to get to. So we're going to be doing what was the original language and how was Moses able to read such text when he wrote Genesis. So let's see if Bodhi thinks the original language was Hebrew next time. Not next time, but, in a couple weeks.
Jillian Wren, I will be putting the small Mexican chihuahua quote on the sampler. Good.
When you're pretending to be Gordon Cole, that's one of the most appropriate times for all caps.
Yep.
All right, so
correct.
Vishanti, what do you got coming up for you in the next next week or so?
Oh man, well, this upcoming week is pretty packed in terms of classes and meetings and seminars that I'm going to be doing. But in terms of me running a show, the week after that, which I know you didn't ask for, but I'm going to say it anyway, on the 30th, I will be producing a live stream on Dr. Kipp's channel, in which we will be hosting Esoterica, Dr. Justin Sledge.
Excellent.
And I am freaking thrilled about it.
Yeah, Justin Sledge is real.
Yes.
I'm a fan.
And also, Kipp's birthday is coming up very soon, so everybody prepare yourself.
Also, there's been some trans pride stuff in the chat, and I agree.
Hell yeah, trans pride.
Trans rights,
baby.
Yep. I don't know what in particular had it come up, but I don't care.
Oh, it's because Jessica Bell is a trans flagger display name.
Oh, okay. All right.
Their display name.
All right.
I'm not sure which pronoun.
Well, there you go.
Jessica.
hey, if we get your pronouns wrong, first, I can guarantee you that at least me and Vishanti are not trying to. Second, please correct us. And third, there are a lot of people, and we will make mistakes. Both for trans and cis people. We will make mistakes. We're not trying to. But do let us know, and we will try to do better. And that is the most I can offer you. Because quite frankly, there are so many people here that there's no way I'm going to be able to keep all of your pronouns in my brain. But yeah, if we screw it up, please let us know, and we'll try to fix. That's literally all I can do.
Fight Mage Studio says, as a trans person, I'd appreciate bailing me out after some trans wrongs.
It might depend on what those trans wrongs are, but we'll look into it. No. Keep going. You're good. Lily P says the first mistake is free. That's a pretty reasonable take.
That's
my thing is like, look, I know people are going to make mistakes, and if they're legitimately trying, then I think they're legitimately doing their best, and their best is not quite as good as you want it to be, but they're still doing their best. I think at that point that like you gotta let people have some slack because they're trying.
Aiden's Miscellany says, be trans, do crimes. Honestly, that is a confirmed, like, that's a tautology now under this administration. Being trans is a crime.
It's less that it's a crime and more that it's something they're just saying doesn't exist. So, yeah, either way, it's not great. But anyway,
I mean,
what's coming
banning healthcare for trans people and banning or prosecuting people who cross state lines to get various forms of healthcare, I think that's pretty distinction without a difference at this point. This administration, man, anyway.
I mean, look, the differences there would be philosophical and certainly not on topic for this show. So, I might have some slightly different nuances to my take on that, but it doesn't really matter a whole lot because either way, people shouldn't be punished for trying to exist publicly in a way that makes them comfortable. Unless that is directly harming others, right? Like, if the way that makes you comfortable is by beating people with baseball bats, then okay, no, you shouldn't be allowed to do that. But if the way that makes you comfortable is by dressing a certain way and requesting that people refer to you in a certain gendered way, that's not directly harming anyone. And that should therefore be perfectly allowable. That's very different than being comfortable because you're beating people with baseball bats. Which is not what being trans is doing. It is literally just saying, hey, I would prefer to be referred to and treated this way, not that way, and I would prefer to dress this way and not that way. Even if you don't like it that someone's doing that, not a good reason to treat them poorly. Because, yeah. And the thing is, while I would like it if everyone was accepting, I would settle for everyone being tolerant. Not there.
And you know what? Honestly, I know, like, in my own personal life, I've kind of started getting away from using the word tolerance because it has the connotation of just putting up with stuff. I prefer coexistence.
I mean, I would.
I know that sounds so twee because of that stupid bumper sticker.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, coexistence, co-dwelling, just live and let live, people. Just.
I agree that would be the ideal, but at this point, right now, just tolerance would be an improvement.
Yeah.
And that if we could just get there, then maybe afterwards we can work on getting further. But right now, we're not even at the tolerance point. And so I think that's the initial goal, is we need to get it to the point where not tolerating trans people is an unacceptable thing to do. And then later we can work on, getting people to accept trans. Because there's a difference. And I do think that we'll get to tolerance before we get to acceptance. And we're not even there yet. So that's what my ideal would be, that people just accept people for who they are, as long as those people aren't being like directly destructive to other people. But we're not even close to that. So I understand that that's not happening anytime soon. Certainly not in the next normal human lifespan. Is that likely to be a thing in North America? Well, in the United States, former United States. But anyway, what's coming up on this channel is Tuesday. I got Jackson with Jackson. I just spoke to Jackson last night. We played some Factorio together, and we confirmed that Jackson with Jackson is on. Then on Thursday, I am releasing the next Brian Thompson human evolution video. This one, I believe, is called Homo Mendax, which is Latin for lying man or liar man, because he tells a lot of lies. Then on Friday, we have Decision Point, the next episode, episode 3 of season 1 of Star Trek Endurance. So that'll put us a quarter of the way through the season, because we're doing a 12-episode arc for each, or 12-episode seasons for 4 seasons. That's our plan. Then that'll be at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Then next week, we are doing the food stream that everyone paid for. We're going to be talking about recipes. It's food and drink, right? So it'll include, we can talk about food. We can talk about different kinds of cocktails, mocktails, other kinds of beverages, all sorts of stuff, right? So if you want to hear what is normally just a tangent that we go on and then correct ourselves and go back, this time it's all tangent. All tangent, no substance. So it's just food stuff. So Now Heart for 50 Sec says, to me, unity is the primary word. Already in my early days when people couldn't see that video games they didn't like are allowed to exist was sad. Yeah, that's the thing, right? People have been doing this kind of nonsense for so long. And I don't know, maybe it's me getting older, but I just do not have the energy to like crap on other people's like video gaming choices, especially now that I recognize that there are a lot of really great games out there that aren't my thing, and that's okay, and that doesn't make them not a great game, right?
It's like food. If you don't like it, just don't play it. If you don't like it, just don't eat it. Like, this is so easy.
One of my favorite video game examples is actually the game FTL. It is an amazing, excellent video game. It's also just not for me. And I get it. And I get why people like it. And I get why people are obsessed with it and play it all the time. I get it. I just don't want to. And that's okay. And the same thing is true for all sorts of other stuff, right? You don't want to go to a drag show? Okay, great. Don't go.
Don't go.
Don't get upset when other people do, though. And unless the people at the drag show are, like, getting pickpocketed by the drag queens or something, this isn't a problem. It's just not. Roshna hashtag upset Keller for $1.99 says, ice cream, pickles, and spam is all you need. That sounds like what... Honestly, that makes it sound like I'm pregnant, if that's all I need. For one thing, because I know my adoptive human mother, ice cream and pickles, not together, but separately, were 2 big things that she had when she was pregnant. And the only time she's ever wanted pickles in her entire life was while pregnant, because otherwise she hates pickles. But when she was pregnant, she couldn't get enough pickles. All about the pickles. All right. Well, we're going to get out of here. If you are interested and able, hop over to the Discord channel. We're going to be watching 4 episodes of Power Rangers Ninja Steel, which is one of the last seasons. Well, it's one of the last teams, right? We only have like 2 more teams after this. So we are getting towards the end, and then we will start in with Godzilla afterwards. So
yes,
yeah, we're going to be watching the Godzilla movies, I believe, in release order. Mostly because trying to do them in chronological order gets very confusing, especially since there's like multiple timelines. So yeah, we're not going to do that.
Cinematic universe.
That's the problem. Is there's like 8 or 9 different cinematic universes within Godzilla. In fact, technically, the timeline that includes the Millennium era, no, the Heisei era Mechagodzilla movies also technically includes some 1998 American movie that, as far as I can tell, was never actually made, but it's still in that timeline anyway, as well as the original Godzilla. It's all very confusing. All right. We'll talk to you all later. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Stay safe out there. And remember, ICE is just the Gestapo. Hey, before you leave, I just want to take a second to thank my patrons and channel members, especially those pledging $20 or above. Van Tovend, Ferrevara, Tapioca Weasel, Whispers, Max Cherry, North Texas Fossils, John Ackerman, Strawberry Vein, Dr. Tapioca Weasel, Elleron Teller, Ian Chen, Kelvin Brostek von Mennen, Landon Knoll, Mabbity Babbity, Sphincter of Doom, and Volus. It's because of my channel members and patrons whom you're seeing on screen that this channel can stay afloat. Without you, it would all shut down. If you want to join the team, there's a link to join the channel below this video, and there's a link to join the Patreon in the description. On the Patreon, you can get a 10% discount for pledging annually, and either way, you get early access to virtually all of my scripted videos, often 3 to 5 months before they come out for the general public. Thanks for watching.